Hey everyone, Donovan Brown here.
Well, not really. Actually, I'm an Azure custom neural voice trained to sound like Donovan Brown. If you would like to learn more, be sure to leave a comment below. This is a companion to the blog series, Web3 Meets DevOps on Medium, linked in the description below. In this video, we will cover part 3, writing the address service. Let's go.
Good morning everyone. No, let's try that again. Good morning everyone. Oh, perfect.
In the previous video of this series, Web3 Meets DevOps, deploying contracts, I externalized the address of the contract. In this video, I will write an Azure function to provide the address to the frontend. I created a new branch named blog/part3 for this step. I used the Azure Static Web Apps VS Code extension to create a HTTP function written in JavaScript named getContractAddress in an API folder at the root of my project. It is a very simple service that returns a value read from an environment variable. From my pipeline, I will get the contract address and store it in an environment variable of the function infrastructure. I implemented test-driven development, TDD, for this function, so I wrote my tests first. Because I use Jest, I created a new file named index.test.js next to the index.js file in the getContractAddress folder of the function project. The contract of the service requires a query parameter named network ID. I wrote two tests. One to return the value if the network ID was provided, and one that returns an error if the network ID is not provided. I used .env to manage environment variables, so I installed it along with Jest and JustJUnit and stored them as dev dependencies. I made sure and ran the command in the API folder. With the dependencies installed, I wrote my tests. The first parameter, passed to Azure Functions, is a context object that exposes a log function. So I created a mock context object to use for testing in a folder named testmocks in the API folder. I named the file default_context.js and added code to mock the call to log. This mock lets me track the calls to log and examine the messages. With the mock in place, I wrote my test. First, I require .env, the index file that holds my function, and the default context that holds my mock. After each test, I needed to clear the calls to any mocks, so I added an after each function and called clearAllMocks. The first test verifies the happy path works. If the caller provides a network ID as a query parameter, the address should be returned from an environment variable. The .env file will be loaded by .env, so the tests can read the environment variable. The second test returns an error if the network ID is not provided. In the root of the API folder, I created a .env file to hold the environment variables for the test. With the test written, I updated the test script of my package.json. In true TDD fashion, I ran the test to see them fail. Then I updated index.js to pass the test. First, I get the network ID query parameter. Then I test to make sure it is not empty. If it is empty, I return a 400 error. With the network ID, I read the value from the environment variable. After logging the value, I build a response and return it to the caller. Finally, I ran the tests using JustJUnit to verify that a results file would be created for use in my pipeline. The junit.xml file was created as expected. This file does not have to be tracked, so at the bottom of my .getignore file in the API folder I added junit.xml. Finally, I checked in all my changes. Then I merged my changes into the main branch. With all the projects in place, it was time to start building my pipeline, which I will do in the next video.
Good morning everyone. No, let's try that again. Good morning everyone. Oh, perfect.